This is the Deep Dive with Adam Roa. What's up, Deep Divers? Thank you for joining me for another episode of Deep Dive Musings. My name is Adam Roa, and today's topic is You Can't Make Me Happy. You cannot make me happy, and it's really about what I've been learning about relationships and my, how should we call it? My unrealistic expectations for relationships that as I've now transitioned out of my relationship, I am realizing I had. And I'm looking back on it with a different perspective and learning a lot. And so I wanted to share that with you today. And before I dive into that, I want to remind you that we are approaching the end of the application window for the dojo, which is my 8-week group coaching program that I'm doing with the Art of Choosing Love crew. And if you are someone who is interested in uncovering more of the beliefs that might be limiting you or the self-sabotage mechanisms that you may have, and developing the skills and the tools to create the life that you want and be supported in that journey by people who are excellent at it and who are also on that journey as well, then I encourage you to get your application in. You can go to theartofchoosinglove.com/thedojo, and that's spelled the D-O-J-O. To get your application in, because we're going to start in early October. And so the window is fast closing. Now, for today's topic, getting to this point required me to have this time by myself, right? This is, strangely enough, I realized that at the age of 34, I am in the spot. For those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see this spot behind me is a place that I've rented for about 3 weeks. It is outside of just like Airbnbs for a week here, a week there. This is the first place that I will have been in paying rent in, that is just mine. in my whole life, because I moved out when I was 18 and I moved in with some roommates. Then when I moved out to Los Angeles, I moved into my aunt and uncle's garage. So it was kind of my own space, but it was still, owned by my aunt and uncle who lived on property. And then I moved in with Azria, my previous partner. And we lived together for the next, decade of our lives. And then as soon as we broke up, I started traveling with the Art of Choosing Love crew with Ryan and cameraman and Matthew. And then met Ruby, who I was dating for a while and like a year. And so anytime that there was available free time, we would shack up together somewhere in the world. And so realistically, for the first time in my life, I am now staying by myself without the presence or the energetic of someone else. And that's kind of crazy for me to even think about, right? I've always considered myself quite an independent person, and to realize that might not be as true as I thought has been eye-opening. And beyond that, what I've been learning about myself is profound. And one of the biggest things that I've recognized recently is that I have had a story that my relationship should make me happy. And that, like, being happy in relationship is one thing, but the belief that my relationship should make me happy is an entirely different framework for reality. Because what it was doing was now creating a belief system in me that would be triggered anytime that my partner was doing something that didn't make me happy. Right? So let's say they were running late, or they did something that was just really inconvenient. Now, the way that I would like to show up in my relationships is, wow, okay, like the world doesn't revolve around me. This is not the end of the world. It's not that big of a deal. Nobody's hurt. We got our health. We're loving life. Great. And I can let it go. But I was noticing, especially more and more towards the end of both relationships, they would become bigger deals. Like these sorts of things would become a bigger deal. And I wasn't entirely sure why. I was like, how come I can't choose out of this? Why is this such a big deal to me? What is the belief underneath that? And I think I've spoken about this, on previous podcasts, where a lot of it had to do with the fight or flight kind of response in my body. The, part of me that was my safety was being triggered. And, so that's one aspect, but this other aspect that I recently uncovered is that because I had the belief that my relationship should make me happy, anytime it didn't, I felt myself going into a thought pattern that perhaps this wasn't the right relationship because it wasn't doing what relationships are supposed to do. If I'm not being made happy in the relationship, it's all wrong. And the truth is, I desire to be the source of my own happiness. I desire to be happy by myself. And therefore, when I get into relationship with someone else, any additional happiness they bring to my life is a bonus. And I can focus on those additional aspects of happiness. And if the relationship is something where it's not bringing additional happiness to my life, I'm not unhappy. You see, I'm not hating life. I'm not feeling trapped. I'm just realizing that I would be happier on my own than I would be in the relationship. And that's a different perspective, because I think a lot of people can probably relate to the idea that they don't know if they can be happy on their own. Or perhaps they know that they're not happy on their own. And so now, if they know, play this game here of just imagining this. If you knew that you weren't happy on your own, then if you got into a relationship that made you happy 30% of the time, you would actually see that 30% as being a bonus, because the 70% of the time that you were unhappy in the relationship is actually what you would feel not in it at all. So getting out of that relationship would mean sacrificing that 30% of happiness that you have found. Crazy, right? So now imagine if you were happy. And by the way, when I say happy, I don't mean that you can't have sad moments or, angry moments. That's part of the human experience. But I'm talking about as a general baseline. You love life. If that is your general baseline, and let's even just say that 80% of the time you're loving life, and you get into a relationship where it adds a bunch of happiness to your life. It adds 50% of the time it's adding happiness to your life. Well, fantastic. The thing is that other 50% of the time where you're finding yourself unhappy, well, that's going to drag you down lower than if you were on your own. You following me? So part of this is in understanding that relationships are there to reflect back to you aspects of yourself that you may not have known, that allow for growth, that allow for expansion, and they are there to bring more love into your life and joy and happiness. If relationships in your life are not bringing additional happiness, you probably can cut them loose, and you'll find yourself actually being much happier. And to do this, to be able to not settle for a relationship that is really not supportive, the foundation is knowing that you're good on your own. The foundation is knowing that you are able to find your way to joy on your own. Because then it's not the responsibility of the other person, which places a really unfair amount of pressure on them that they'll never live up to. If you can't find happiness on your own, no one else is ever going to sustainably keep you happy. And so it's not that I am not happy on my own. It's that I haven't ever had to figure out how to sustain my happiness on my own. And I believe that right now in my life, I'm being called forward into that. I'm being called forward into how do I maintain my love for life independent of anyone else's actions? Where's my energetic sovereignty in this experience? And from there, I can enter into relationships, not needing them to complete that for me, not needing someone else to be the source of my happiness, but instead just be an amplifier of my happiness. And then in the moments where there's disconnect, in the moments where there's something that doesn't feel good, they're not dragging me into unhappiness. They are simply, I get to hold a baseline level that we don't drop below. Because from this disconnect, I can say, okay, we're disconnected, but I don't need to disconnect from myself. I can go into all of the self-love practices and the routines that I know are a part of my happiness, my joy, that keep me in my highest elevated state. And I can always return to that as the foundation. And that level of strength, that knowingness, that confidence is something that is probably, in my estimation, the single best thing we can do for any of our relationships and romantic partners, to find that for ourselves. And yes, it's been a painful transition for me in a lot of ways to be like, I don't want to say losing, but to be transitioning out of relationship in order to learn this. But I also see how this is a necessary piece of me becoming the type of partner that I want to be, becoming the person that I desire to show up as in relationship and outside of it, just for myself. And so for those of you who are resonating with this, if you're listening to this and you're saying, wow, I'm realizing that I do kind of expect my partner to make me happy. Reevaluate it. Ask yourself, are you happy on your own? Are you happy by yourself? And if you are, then start to ask the question of, okay, what sorts of characteristics, what sorts of personality traits would I want in a partner that would amplify the amount of joy I already feel? And if you're like me and you're saying, wow, okay, there's a lot of times where I'm not happy, just as a baseline, I'm not feeling good when I'm on my own. And so what are the things that I get to do to rectify that? What are the things that I get to do to be happy on my own, first and foremost? And from there, I create the foundation upon which healthy relationships can be built. This is how you can apply it to your own life. This is how I'm applying it to mine. And I'm in it. This is not me speaking from a place of having it all figured out. This is me being in it. And for those of you who are in it yourselves, I honor you for your journey and all of the work that you're doing, even listening to this or watching this. And I know that a lot of people could resonate. So please help me by sharing this out, sharing the message, subscribing on iTunes and SoundCloud, leaving a review. This is all ways in which you can support this sort of information being accessible to more people. Thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.